I was waiting for that little red thing.
Stop sign?
Yeah, the stop sign. Good evening, everyone. Good to see all of you here this evening come for these moments of worshiping God together with one another, and of course to learn a new song that will give honor to Jesus. Have you noticed lately, as we've been looking at the various songs or singing the various songs, how often the word king or reign or Lord is used in the songs? As I mentioned this morning, when you talk about the word kingdom, it's used 162 times in the New Testament alone. It's a prominent word that's used throughout the scriptures, and one that really does talk about who Jesus is. There's another term that is used for Jesus that I'm going to share with you this evening. But before I get to that term, who do people go to, or who do they look to when they feel as though life has thrown so many obstacles and so many difficulties or trials their way? Who or what does a person go to when maybe they have got caught up into some kind of sin that they've been wrestling with, and they're finding it really hard to get out from under its load and just to be released from it? Who do people go to in that time? Who do people go to, or what do they go to when they become discouraged or depressed or you're down? I'm talking about when life gets hard. To whom do you go to find hope and grace and peace and righteousness and a defense? Well, in the new song that we're going to be learning this evening, we're going to be pointing to the one who is able to help us the most. And the title of the song is, Lord, I Need You. And in that song, you're going to hear the word hope. You're going to hear the word grace. You're going to hear the word defense. You're going to hear the word righteousness. That seems to be all over that song. So for a few minutes, I want to tell you why you can have confidence in going to this one that I'm talking about this evening, and that, of course, is Jesus. Let me invite you to open your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4, and we're going to begin reading in verse 14, and I want to read down to Hebrews, the 5th chapter, and verse 7. Now, I'm not going to talk very little. I'm going to talk very little about verses 1 through 7 of chapter 5, but it really is layered there so that you understand how powerful verses 14 through 16 really are for you as a Christian. Here's what it reads. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. For if we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. For every high priest taken from among men is appointed on behalf of men in things pertaining to God, in order to offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can deal gently with the ignorant and misguided, since he himself also is beset with weaknesses. Because of it, he is obligated to offer sacrifices for sins, as for the people, so also for himself. And no one takes the honor to himself, but receives it when he is called by God, even as Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself so as to become a high priest, but he who said of him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you," just as it says also in another passage, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." In the days of his flesh, he offered up both prayers and supplications with loud cryings and tears to the one who is able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his piety. So when you think about this passage of Scripture in Hebrews, the 4th chapter, especially in verses 14 down through 16, notice what he says. He says, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession. Another description of Jesus, beyond just being the King and Lord, is that he is a high priest. And he says because of him being the high priest, that we can hold fast to the confession that we have. So what does it mean to hold fast to a confession? Well, literally it means to hang in there. It means to persevere. It means to hang on, just to stay there and not to give up. Why? Because he says Jesus is the Son of God. He is the one that cares for us. Now, Jesus is not only a priest, but it says that he is a high priest. But not just that he is a high priest, it says that he is a great high priest. And no one gave him that position. That is position, or no man gave him that position. That is a position that God himself gave to him. And so the great high priest is that which is given to Jesus, and no other person is called great in that kind of a way. Only Jesus has been noted to be that way. And it's because he so far, surpasses any of the high priests in the Levitical system. Now, most of us are not all that familiar with the idea of a high priest, much less a great high priest. But under the law of Moses, a high priest had a huge amount of responsibility. And not only did he have responsibility, he had privilege. And there was a lot of awesome respect that he was to be given. And not only that, there was a lot expected of him as this high priest. So we're not so familiar with those kinds of things. And yet, when you talk about Jesus being a great high priest, now we're talking about someone that has something to do with us. Because of the high priest in the Old Testament, we may not be all that familiar because we're not used to going to priests for anything. But in the New Testament, to know that Jesus Christ is a great high priest, well, it says that he is there in order that we might be able to find help. You see, the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies, which is in Israel's temple. It was a special place where they kept the Ark of the Covenant, and there God presented his presence there at that place. And so that was the Holy of Holies. It was separate from the rest of the temple. A large curtain was there, a very thick curtain, and no one dared almost even look upon it. Certainly not to go into it. It is an extremely dangerous place for humans to go into because of the presence of God. And those who at one time or another had touched the Ark of God suffered the consequences of that. We probably think of Uzzah as one who touched the Ark of God when David was transferring it on a wagon rather than having it carried by poles, and it started to become unbalanced. The Ark looked like it was going to fall over, and Uzzah grabbed it to stop it from falling over, and he died because of that. He violated what God said about the Ark and no one being able to touch it. Not only that, the high priest was only allowed to go into the Holy of Holies once a year. And when he did so, he had to go in with blood of a sacrificed animal. He couldn't take his own blood in, but so he took blood in for himself as well as for the people themselves. They also did something that was unique. They put a rope around his waist. So if something were to happen within the Holy of Holies and in God's presence he were to die, they were able to drag him out of the place without being at risk themselves. So the high priest of the Levitical system was an honored position, but it had an awesome responsibility and it had an awesome privilege that was connected to it. However, when it speaks of Jesus being our great high priest, he's better in that. Number one, he went into the Holy of Holies, or heaven itself, not in a temple that was made with human hands, but into heaven itself. And not with the blood of animals, but with his own blood that he shed on the cross for the sins of the world. And not only that, it says that he goes before the very presence of God. And that makes a lot of sense when you couple that with Hebrews, the 12th chapter and verse 2, where it says that he is seated at the right hand of God as king. And so he is in that very presence there. And I guess what I'm trying to get across to you is that we have a high priest that is in heaven that is there for us because he cares for us, and because he loves us, and that he wants to advocate for us. He wants to intercede for us. He wants to mediate on our behalf. He wants us to feel our righteousness through him. He wants us to be filled with hope. He wants us to understand what grace is about because of where he is. And so when life gets tough and it gets hard and you're struggling with sin, or you're just going through discouragement or just down, remember who is on your side, that you're not by yourself in this. You have one that's on your side and wants the very best for you. In a Bible study, it was called It Had to Be Money. Jill Briscoe, she tells about a friend of hers who had lost her husband. And they're at the funeral visitation, and the deceased's wife and his sister was there beside the casket. And as people would come by, they would greet them. And the sister kept saying, as the people would come by to greet them, she would say, pointing to her brother, there he is. There he is. And someone else would come by and she would say, there he is. There he is. And the wife finally, she says, she couldn't take it anymore. And so in a very loving way, as much as she possibly could, she said to her, if I believed there he is, I would be so miserable. He's not there. If there he is, if that is where he is, then we're in trouble. But there he isn't. He's gone to a better place, or that's just his body. That's what encased him, but that's not who he is. Over the last couple of years, I've had a father-in-law die. I've had my mother has died, and now my mother-in-law has died. And I can say to you, at seeing each of those people, I could never be able to say, there she is, or there he is, or with Gloria, there she is, because there she isn't. That's just her body that is there. But the real person is that person who is in the very presence of God. They live their lives because they love God and want to be in his presence. The great high priest has made that available. So when life gets hard and you feel like wanting to quit, don't. Instead, hold fast to your confession. Persevere, hang in there. Notice what it says in verse 15. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. So Jesus is not only the Son of God, he is the God who suffers with me. In fact, that word who sympathizes means to suffer with. And so what it's saying is that when I am suffering, when I'm struggling, then Jesus gets all that. He understands that. He has went through those exact same things. He has went through every weakness that we have struggled with, every pain, every temptation. He's experienced all those things except for one thing, and that is he didn't sin, and oftentimes we do. So Jesus is the God who suffers with us, and he became a human being. And as Dan mentioned several times, not only this morning but this evening, he tabernacled with us. He lived with us. He was a part of who we are and what we are about. In an article that was written in the Christian Standard, a fellow by the name of Matt Proctor wrote about his two sons. He has one son whose name is Carl. He's 5 years old, and then he has a 3-year-old son by the name of Conrad. And he says one of the things that his boys like to do is they like to dress up, and when they dress up, they'll put on, say, a pair of jeans and a blue T-shirt, and they'll get their dad to do the same thing, and they get a kick out of it because he'll put on jeans and then he'll put on a blue T-shirt, and they'll say, "Look, Dad." Same. And then he says they love to play, football in the living room, but they're little guys. And so as they get ready to start playing the football, Conrad will say to his dad, you need to come down, you need to kneel down. You can't stand there because he's too big, he's too scary. You need to come down to eye level. And when he gets down to eye level, he says that his son Conrad will come over and lay his hand on his shoulder and say, "Hey, Dad." Same. Or during the summer, Matt, he scraped his leg and had a scab on the side of his leg while he was working on the house, and now he's got a scab on his leg. And so Conrad, he scraped his leg, and he grabs his dad, and he says to his dad, "There, see, Dad?" Same. Okay, so that's a child's heart. But here's the point. The point is God himself has felt what we feel. He became a man. He got down on our level, looked us face to face as a human being. He hurt as we hurt. He bled as we bled. He understands what we're going through. And for any of us to be tempted to say, well, God, you just don't know what I'm going through. You don't know how hard it is. You don't know the difficulties of life. God will look at us and say, no, listen. I became a human being. I walked the life that you have walked. I've been tempted in all things as you have been tempted. And then he looks us in the eye and he says, "Hey, Richard, same. With one difference, and that is that he was able to overcome sin. So Jesus is the God who suffers with you in your pain. So don't be afraid to go to him for help. Verse 16, let us therefore draw near with confidence to the throne of grace so that we may receive mercy and find grace and help in the time of need. I like the way Nancy Spielberg expressed it. She wrote, Lord, I crawled across a barrenness to you with my empty cup, uncertain in asking any small drop of refreshment. If only I had known you better, I'd have come running with a bucket. In your time of need, don't go crawling to God with a small tin cup. Run to him with a bucket. He is full of grace. He understands what's going on with your life. And because of that, that's why he is our advocate. He is one who comes alongside with us in life. He is our intercessor. Sometimes we don't know what to say or how to say it to God, but he does. And sometimes he's our mediator. There's one mediator between God and man, and that's Jesus Christ. No one else can mediate and understand both sides. He was both God and man. He can represent God, but he can also represent you before his throne. And I think one of the best things of all is that he is our friend. Jesus says, no longer do I call you servants, but now I have called you friends. And that's a wonderful thought when you think about it. So he is our hope, our defense, our righteousness, our grace. And this song that we're going to learn this evening, Lord, I Need You, is going to talk about all those things that are super blessings for us as Christians. So the lesson is yours. Do you have a song of invitation? We're going to sing a song of invitation. If you'll stand, if you'd like to respond at this time, now would be a good time to do it.